Hello and welcome to another episode of My Football Story from the Honest Football Podcast. I'm Charlie Betts and joining me today is Diarmuid O'Carroll. We talk in detail about Diarmuid's upbringing in Gaelic football mad County Kerry and his subsequent move to Glasgow Celtic. Diarmuid is very honest about his football journey and the impact that the pro game can have on a player's well-being. Later we discuss his journey back to Northern Ireland and his success of winning 4 leagues in 4 years with Cliftonville and Crusaders. Diarmuid can now be found as part of the coaching setup at Motherwell. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And as always, you can find all of our content on Twitter at HonestFootballFree. And I'm delighted to say that Diarmuid's with me now. So thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, I know you've been out training this morning, so I appreciate you giving up the time to be with us this afternoon.
Yeah, no pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
So what I want to do, obviously, you've had a fantastic career and we're going to talk about what you're doing now. Obviously alluded to it sort of about sort of training and things like that. But what I want to do first of all is just go back to the beginning, really, like about your first ever memory of football, whether it was watching or playing or anything like that, really. Can you remember the first time you ever sort of had any contact with football, really?
It's a weird one because where I'm from in Ireland, it's a big Gaelic area. It's a big Gaelic football area in Kerry. So your first contact usually is with Gaelic football. But I'd say 94 World Cup, I'd have been 7. So that was it was a great moment in terms of you seeing Irish players on a big stage, Irish coaches on a big stage, and it was obviously there was a lot of talk about it, a lot of like attraction for it. So they were the first kind of big watching football memories. And then from there you look at, we had, again, it was a small town I'm from, so there's a 7-a-side tournament at our local club every year. So I played in that, I think, at about 7 or 6, maybe under 10. So that was the first thing, but it was obviously that was like the World Cup to us, like it was amazing. So it was brilliant. It was all our closest friends and stuff, being a small town as well. So it became properly competitive, and it's a real badge of honour to say you've won it or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah. No, I appreciate that. No, what I've always wondered, obviously, you went on to be a professional, but at school, were you sort of that much better than everyone else? Or, because it happens, I suppose people sort of develop at different rates, but, obviously you went on to have a professional career, but were you that much better than everyone else in your year, or did it take a bit longer, in that sense?
I was in the better ones in the time, definitely. But I think the big thing is, if you look back at our team, we had an awful lot of fantastic athletes. So in terms of, they maybe didn't have the football career that I had, but a lot of them went on and won All-Ireland titles in Gaelic football and became legends in club Gaelic football and stuff like that. And we were blessed in that way, that everyone was an athlete, everyone was professional, although young. They were all very, very good. And I would say of our club starting lineup, probably 7 or 8 played county GAA, like at a very high level. To represent Kerry is a very illustrious level to get to. So no, I had obviously got talent in football itself, but in terms of the level across the board, it helped me, the fact that everyone around us were athletes, they were sports people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Did you ever have the ambition of playing, obviously, for, in terms of Gaelic? Well, there's quite a big Gaelic football scene we are in Luton, but obviously not in the same level as where you are. But so I'm familiar with all of it. But it's I don't know, was that something you ever sort of aspired to do, or was it always sort of soccer, for the want of a better phrase?
Yeah, it's weird. Every Kerryman's dream is to play for Kerry in GAA. It's weird, but I was probably the kind of more so of a black sheep then, because I always leaned towards football for some reason. But I did, don't get me wrong, I always thought it was more realistic for me to try and represent Kerry at minor level or under 21 or something like that in GAA. And it's just, I was just very lucky. I got spotted in different things at young ages, which is unusual where I'm from. So the reality of being a professional footballer didn't really become an option until it kind of happened. Do you know what I mean? It was a pipe dream. It's a pipe dream for most people, but it was just when it kind of came about, then you realize, oh, well, maybe this could happen. And it just it all just went from there. It was amazing.
Yeah. So obviously, I know you played, your career, you're obviously a forward, but did you play that position when you were at school, or, because, you get some people who, they're a left winger and then by the time they're a professional, they're centre half or something like that, so it's, what was that like?
Yeah, I was under 11 down. I was kind of smaller. I was like trickier and actually quicker, which was what I wasn't when I was playing. But so I played right wing quite a bit. I was always top end of the pitch. I was always probably greedy for goals and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, and then I used to play midfield for the school. We had a very similar setup. Our club side pretty much played for our school side. We won national titles and stuff, which was
Right.
great. But I actually played centre midfield purely because the teacher always thought that was my better position, which was we laughed at the time because I was playing international and things like that as a striker.
Yeah.
But I don't know. In hindsight, I think he might have been right. I think probably if I'd have been a midfielder younger in my days, it probably would have been better for me. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. No, of course. Yeah. I suppose it's difficult, isn't it, at that age to sort of, probably get pigeonholed quite early, I suppose, even from where you are now working with, football, the sort of level you are with the under 18s and stuff, I suppose.
And I think when someone is scoring goals or they enjoy scoring goals, you always lean towards that end of the pitch. And then when you're in a small community, you're the person scoring more often than not. So you naturally think of yourself as an attacker or as a striker when maybe you had attributes that were suited a different position. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, just to sort of move on a bit, then obviously we'll get onto the sort of international bit in a minute. But the obviously, you end up getting picked up by Glasgow Celtic. How did that come about? I know you're probably going to ask that a lot, but what was that shock to you, or were you expecting to sort of get maybe? Was there interest from clubs the other side of the water, for want of a better phrase?
Well, there's a tournament in Ireland where you represent your county. It's the first time you kind of come together and play. In theory, the best from the club sides represent your county in a national tournament, and it's hosted every year. It's called the Kennedy Cup. It's under 13, so that would be the first kind of exposure to Irish scouts and to international scouts and everything. You're still very, very young, but I was lucky. I played in it the year young, so I played 2 years. So when I went back to it as a 12, 13-year-old, when I was at my peak, it was a lot more comfortable. It wasn't daunting. I knew exactly what to do, and we actually did really well. So as we progressed, then a few of us there was talk of like, oh, well, he likes you, or this scout likes you and stuff like that. But it didn't really hit home. In that way, it wasn't really, do you know what I mean? It was just all noises. It was kind of, because it was so unusual for anybody from where we're from to go anywhere. You don't think of it. While if you're based in Dublin or Cork, you probably already know these scouts by name. You'd know who they're from. They've seen you play 20 times. Do you know what I mean? So after that tournament, we did quite well. And then I think Wolves was my first ever. The Wolves scout contacted my parents or contacted the club and just said that they'd like me to come over. I think I was 13, 14. So that was the first time that it started to feel like it was a possibility or in some way real. And then from there, then I went to Leicester, did a little thing with Aston Villa. And then as you progressed, under 15 is the first international team. So at 14, then I was in the international side and stuff like that, which was amazing because, again, it was very much Dublin-based or Cork-based players. So from there, I made a decision then at 15 for under 16s. It was my last year. Most players go at 16. It does change. There is exceptions, Seamus Coleman, things like that. But most players go at that age, what would be GCSE or junior cert in Ireland. So I kind of said, right, well, I'll give it a go for a year. So some of the teams in Dublin, the club sides in Dublin, had asked me to come and play for them for a season. So what I did was I made the decision. I went up I flew up. They flew me up on a Sunday morning to play. I just trained with my own team. Flew up on a Sunday morning, played, would say at 12 o'clock on a Sunday, and then got the train home and played for Home Farm, which was, they have a huge like track record of players going away. I think like Richard Dunn, list long as your arm of boys that went away. And also there was probably 10, 12 players in that squad at the time that were internationals that I played with. So Darren O'Dea would have been in that squad, for example. And then a few more boys like Shane Supple ended up playing some games for Ipswich. Owen Garvin played a lot of games in the championship. There's a few more boys, but of that team, it was already, I knew a lot of them, so it was comfortable. And then from there, then we did a friendly tournament over in Scotland, and Largs in Scotland, and Celtic were one of the teams.
Right.
So I didn't know for one anyway that they were interested in us already from the international team, and they knew all about us. So we went, and their team at the time, a lot of which ended up being my teammates, but they were very highly rated, the youth team. So as I said, we were pretty much an international team. We had a full squad of internationals. So we went and won. Actually, Darren, although he's a defender and made his name as a defender, Darren scored twice from midfield.
Right.
And we all played well. So after that, then there was 4 of us that were invited over for what we thought was a trial, but effectively just to kind of get to know us, get to meet us, and then offer us a contract. So
wow,
it was mad. It's like before I got offered the contract, I think even though I'd done the move to Dublin, you still don't really imagine that will come through. Do you know what I mean? it was still a kind of a dream almost.
Coming from maybe a smaller community, what's it like then? Is it quite overwhelming when you go to somewhere like Celtic? You know, it's obviously a massive institution, and you know, in a big city, and all of that. You know, or I suppose does your mentality have to be different because you know you want to obviously stake your claim for a place?
No matter what happens when you're 15, 16, you have a certain element of cockiness and a little bit of maybe belief and arrogance in yourself. Like, so you don't worry too much about that. Obviously, it's a big change going from where I lived to Glasgow, but again, how it worked out was 4 of that team. So myself, Darren, and 2 other lads from Dublin all signed at the same time. So we all signed together and we all lived in the house together. So it was the same house with the same boys you knew. So that definitely eased the transition. You hear of a lot of players that leave places and they end up like living on the training ground in like a dorm environment. And that would have been very, very difficult. But we were blessed and we landed in a very, very good digs with lovely people. And because obviously we were together experiencing it, then we were able to experience the highs and lows together and help each other. Do you know what I mean?
So obviously, I know being at Celtic, like sort of mentioned, it's a massive institution, obviously world-renowned club. When you're playing, whether it's for the underage or reserves or whatever, do you feel there's a bit more pressure maybe, you know, now looking back on your career when you're playing for them, or actually is it almost, you know, do you just play almost a carefree attitude because you're playing for them and therefore you back yourself a bit more?
I think we obviously as Celtic are now winning youth team games, running your favourites in every game. But I think the key is that Tommy Burns, who was the academy director and stuff at the time, and our coaches were first class, but they all had the mentality that beating, with no disrespect to Motherwell or St. Mirren or someone, beating them 6-0 under 18 didn't matter. It was how you do it, the style in which you do it, the looking for perfection almost even against lower levels. So they're striving for perfection all the time, because the only games you truly get judged on at that level is Old Firm games, even at that level. And if you were tested against a European team or something like that, they would kind of be like, oh, you scored a hat-trick against St. Mirren, and what? You should be scoring a hat-trick against St. Mirren kind of thing. So there's almost a constant rib at you to get better and do more and to be obviously nearly perfect and push on out of the U team and push the reserves and stuff, like, you know.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your honesty on that. That's fascinating to hear that, actually. I didn't know that was sort of the sort of, I suppose it makes sense that would be the approach. You just mentioned about obviously the sort of, you know, maybe progressing onto the reserve team and training with the first team and stuff. What's the difference? Because obviously I've never been a professional, but, you know, what's the difference in the style of football between, say, under 18s and then reserve team or adults, for want of a better phrase? Is it the physicality, the speed? You know, what would be the main difference?
I think in terms of reserves, it's just a little bit extra physicality, a little bit extra expectation in terms of what you're not as free to, like the youth teams obviously play more kind of school-based pitches and academy-based pitches, while you're always in a stadium at reserve level. Right. We were lucky that the structure at the time was that a lot of first-team players could play. And Martin O'Neill had a big first-team squad, so I got to play in the reserves with Paul Lambert, with Bobo Balde, Momo Silla, and then at the time there was younger guys that were older than us, but younger fellas like Sean Maloney, Craig Beattie, John Kennedy, guys like that who went on to have really big careers, were young. So when you go into the reserves, you're not looked upon as a young lad. You're looked upon as, okay, well, you need to be able to play at the same level as I was the striker, so Sean Maloney, Craig Beattie, these boys. And that's obviously, you're rated against them, you're judged against them. It's not like, oh, well, he's 2 years younger, we'll let him off. That's not the mentality. It's more, it's not sink or swim, but you have to be a big boy and you have to be able to take criticism and things like that. Well, we had Kenny McDowell, he ended up Rangers first team coach of Walter Smith and assistant manager under Ali McCoist. He was first class, but he was quite strict. He was quite straight to the point. He didn't beat around the bush in terms of criticism, and in terms of, now it's probably a lot softer in terms of how you have to give your message across. But that made us all as players, because if we made a mistake, he didn't say, oh, it's okay, don't worry about it. He told us, that's a mistake, you do that in front of 60,000, you'll never play again, kind of thing. Do you know what I mean?
No, of course, that makes sense, doesn't it?
So it's just in terms of setting the standards, you're playing alongside players who expect you to be ready, and if you're not ready, they'll tell you. So you automatically had to kind of raise your game.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting you said it, because that sort of moves on to the next part then, because, you know, during your time at Celtic, then you went on loan to Ross County at that point.
Yeah.
What's, you know, obviously you're going from that environment, I suppose, of Celtic, where, like you say, pretty much perfection, to then, with all due respect, maybe Ross County, where the aspirations aren't the same as a club like Celtic. Is that difficult, or almost did you feel like, do you need to drive that a bit more coming from Celtic, say, down to something like Ross County for them?
No, I don't think I could. I don't think I felt like I could have driven it, because I think you're in the big bad world. Then you're in a man's environment. Like I was, I think 19 going there, and I had never experienced like playing with men. Obviously, reserve team football, but it's not the same. It's not the same tempo or physicality. But when I went there, and it was, again, I was lucky because it was a couple of the boys that I knew from Celtic previously, and also other loan players that were there. But straight away, it's just the little kind of experience tricks that you wouldn't get against you in the youth team or reserve team. So jumping for a header in the youth team or reserve team, people just jump for a header, and the better guy in the header wins it. While in the first team, when you're jumping, someone leans into you, someone maybe gives you a dunt before you go and do your header. When you're running, you're innocently watching the ball thinking, I'm going to run that channel, and someone just checks your run.
Right.
So it was all little, it was like, guys, I would have been at the start of the game looking, going, right, I'm quicker than him. I might be taller than him. I might fancy myself technically against him, but I can't get near him because he's 32 and has played in 400 games in his career. So he knows every trick in the book. So I actually found that it was brilliant, and it's something that I'd recommend for any young lad to get out of the bubble of a like academy dream football. But I actually struggled. I found it really, really difficult. And I was in and out of the team. I didn't start all the time I was there. So it was difficult. But again, something that I would recommend to everyone to go and do in loan, but pick the right club and pick the right time.
Well, that's just the last. It's just a very short aside on that. I was just going to ask, because I think you're one of the few players we've spoken to who've gone out on loan. How much choice do you have over that in terms of does the club just say to you, right, you're going to Ross County Monday morning, or as a player, do you get much choice in where you go on loan?
I didn't at that time. It was more I wanted to go, and I was probably, because it didn't really matter. I was away from home. I didn't really care. I was just like, I get the chance to go on loan. Brilliant. I'm at the time probably sick of the reserves, sick of the 18s. I need to go test myself. And the manager thinks this is a good idea. Let's do it. The Ross County connection was due to the director of football used to be the academy director at Celtic years ago. So there was a link. Paul Lawson, Michael Gardine, different boys went up there on loan as well. So it was, you're not given much choice at that stage. As you get older in your career, then you can make your own calls. But at that stage, it's just, we think this would be good for you. Go and do it.
Right.
And I think you'd find that if you turned that down, you'd probably get told you get a clip around the ear quickly enough just to say, we'll tell you, you're not telling us, you're 18 and 19.
No, it makes sense. But like you say, I suppose the value of it is as you mentioned a minute ago, it's so important for players, younger players especially, obviously, to get that experience. But just on the whole then, how would you look back on your time at Celtic? Is it quite fondly, or maybe a bit of a, not missed opportunity, but maybe is there other things you would have done differently, or were you on the whole quite happy with your time there?
No, like I was delighted. Like I was pretty much in the reserves for 4 seasons out of 5. I had 5 years. I ended up with, I think, 2 or 3 different contracts when I was at the club. So that in itself is an achievement. I got the chance to train and play with some top players. The consistent trend throughout my whole career, and in particular late on at Celtic, was mentally I didn't deal with setbacks in the way that a person who goes on to play at the top level does, basically. I used to overthink, and I still overthink. Even with coaching sessions, you still overthink things. And I was overly critical of the smallest thing. So that's not a regret. It's not something I can control or I could look back and control. But it is the thing that maybe made it balanced out. If I had maybe very good ability in areas, it balanced it out, and that killed me. Where I was very not mentally weak, but pretty mentally weak after, like, for the last 18 months of the time there, which then made football not as enjoyable. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, of course.
But that's not something people say, oh, have you got regrets? That's not something I could regret or control. It's just my personality. And in hindsight, maybe the coaches or the club could have seen that and maybe, do you know what I mean, steered me appropriately. But
yeah. Do you feel like now, nowadays I think, is there a bit more training in that for, I think, are people a bit more aware of that kind of thing in players? I suppose working in a professional club yourself now, is it a bit more acceptable for people to sort of come and intervene, for the want of a better phrase? It's probably not the right word, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. And I think the message itself is softer. I think no. And that's not softer in saying that the message is fudged. It's just delivered in a different way. It's delivered in a less argumentative or aggressive tone. You still get messages, but the the messages that are received now are generally followed with real specific instruction as to what you can do or what you could have done. And as I said, we worked with fantastic coaches, but it was a case of, again, you go back to sink or swim. It's always that kind of case. But maybe in hindsight now in the modern game, I always react better to a pat in the back than a dig in the ribs. Like I'm a guy who needs enthusiasm. So it's recognizing that in your players, who needs a kick and who needs an arm around them. You know what I mean?
I think, you know, I'm not putting words in your mouth. I think it probably makes you a better coach for that, I suppose, because, you know, even in grassroots football, you know, you get some coaches, it's that one way of, you know, like you say, a rollicking or nothing. And I suppose actually, if that doesn't work, where do you go? Whereas I suppose it gives you that, you know, dynamic sort of approach to it then a bit more, doesn't it, in that sense? But yeah.
And I think that's part of the motivation behind, I love working with younger players. They're all different. Like they are literally, every one of them is different. Everyone's from they've different education levels. They've different financial backgrounds. They've different worries, concerns, physical traits, whatever. So you don't have to treat every one of them differently, but you have to notice if there is one different. Do you know what I mean? The same 6 out of 10 thing will work with most of them. It's just that one guy that needs something different. And there are still coaches that think, that's soft, that's modern crap. Like, you shouldn't say that. But it's the same in teaching. It's the same in any kind of education environment. It's the same in managing, in any regular day-to-day office job. Certain people need more attention in certain ways than others. If you don't recognize that, it's to your detriment in terms of your delivery.
No, I completely agree. With you. But we'll get back to your career, because it's not really about sort of me and my sort of I don't know, teaching development. But anyway, so from there you then you know, went to Morecambe. I think we spoke to Neil Wainwright actually recently, who would have been there around the same time as you. So sort of 2 questions really. How did that sort of come about? And then I suppose you know, why Morecambe really, as opposed to, I mean, coming from Celtic, I imagine there would have been other clubs that would have been interested.
Yeah, it was a strange thing, because although I had come to the end of the rung at Celtic actually wanted to offer. So verbally, Peter Orwell had offered a contract to my agent at the time. He'd said, listen, we want to keep him. And there may have been an element of protecting the investment, protecting the compensation at that stage, because in the January previously, St Mirren had tried to bring me in, but they were told they had to buy me, because obviously I'd been there 5 years and I was doing well, reserve level. I was still like one of the top reserve players and stuff. So they were thinking, right, we've put X amount in terms of into him. We originally bought him from Ireland for a small fee, so we need to get something back. I didn't intimate to Celtic, but it looked, with Celtic at the time, it was like, right, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know if I'm going to stay in the game. I might just leave it, because, as I said, I was struggling in terms of how I was dealing with things. And then my agent knew of interest from, it was Sammy McElroy through Jimmy Nicholl. I think it was random. So Jimmy Nicholl was a youth team coach and stuff the whole way up, and had seen me in reserves and youths and stuff. So I think he had then recommended me to Sammy through the agent, and then Sammy signed me off the back of it. So I think the Morecambe one was because if we'd went to go to St Mirren or Kilmarnock or Motherwell, I think Celtic would have dug their heels in about compensation and stuff.
Yeah. No, of course, no. So obviously, then, sort of being in England and the sort of football league, is there a difference again, even from maybe your time at Ross County with first team football? Is there much of a difference between, say, football in Scotland and the lower leagues in England? Because, you know, our whole podcasts, we sort of avoid the Premier League. And our sort of passion is the lower league and non-league football, and it does get a bad rep sometimes for just being sort of long ball, kicking lumps at each other, and we know it not to be like that. But what was your experience of sort of that?
No, I loved it. I actually think, in comparison to the Scottish level that I played at, particularly probably with Ross County, and then afterwards in the Championship with Airdrie, it was probably slower and less physical. So in that way as well, it led to it being more technical. There was a lot of probably better athletes as well, in terms of it was quicker, more powerful, stronger. Like, everything was, you found that you had to be technically better, because physically, unless you were physically exceptional, you had to stand out by your level of play. But no, I loved it. That was probably the happiest year I had was at Morecambe. I would say that was probably of all the clubs, the best all-round club that I played for in that way, because it was just a very small town club. And like you mentioned, Wayne, Barry Roach, boys like that, who came in at the same time. they ended up becoming really good friends and even still to this day, like, you know. So
yeah, of course. No. I mean, we spoke to Neil Rainwright, and he spoke very highly of you sort of privately. So that's that's good. I appreciate his sort of your honesty with that. But just on a quick aside, then you mentioned it earlier about representing your country, and obviously, you know, all up to under 21s. You know, is international football slower because it gets that reputation?
I think it depends. It depended on at U team level as to who. It's less tactical, even like at U team level. It's never going to be as tactical as the first team. But that you come across different challenges in every game. So if it's Italians, if it's Japanese, if it is whatever. I remember we played, I think it was Andorra or somebody like that, like what would be considered a really smaller nation. And I've never come across a team that they literally knew every trick in the book. They were dirty. They were like simulation. And it was the first time that we'd ever really experienced it. And although all our players were at Celtic, some were at Man United, Liverpool, loads of academies, our frustration levels went through the roof because they were doing little things like they maybe nip you at the corner, and then if you reacted, they'd hit the ground as if they've hit you, kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? So it was, and we ended up drawing. We ended up nil each. Like we never looked like beating them, and they didn't have anybody who could get anywhere near our squad. So it was different experiences was the bigger thing, rather than the difference in pace and tempo. It was the fact that the different style, it was so noticeable. Play the Italians, they were all like Juventus and AC Milan, they were fantastic players, but they were just a completely different to the UK style of football. Do you know what I mean? So that was the thing. You remember each experience. Probably really quick, really sharp, all that kind of stuff. Do you know? So a great learning experience. For that.
No, of course, no. I think we probably don't appreciate that from the sides, whether you watch it on TV or at the ground. You maybe don't appreciate the like those little nuances that you're talking about. But where does that rank for you in terms of playing for your country? Because you spoke to a few pros, and it's sort of different for different people. You know, because obviously we'll go on to your career then when you went to Northern Ireland, the Irish League, and you know had some fantastic sort of accolades there. But where does playing for your country rank?
It's amazing, like right up there. Like at the end of the day, I'm lucky enough to play at every level, every single, except for seniors. And that's because my first team career didn't get to that level. It just didn't. With Ireland at the time, if you didn't play probably Championship, SPL or higher, you didn't get in the squad. And that's probably still even similar now.
Yeah.
So it's huge pride because you look back at the players you played with. Like I remember I went to Ireland, played Denmark in the playoff game in Dublin a few years, probably only 18 months, 2 years ago, and Ericsson scored a hat-trick. And I think I'd played with something like 14 of the squad. So say like of 21, 22 players that I'd played with all them through club and international and stuff. But which is amazing. Like when you think back, nobody can take those experiences away from you. To score goals for your country, for your family to come and see you represent you for your country. They're just memories. And obviously you have the caps, you have the jerseys, but it's just the memories that you have from it. You never take stock at the time, but when you look back now to think, that's amazing. Like I've played at all those levels. It's fantastic. If you could only maybe value it at the time a bit more. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I suppose though, but like you say, it's hard, isn't it? I think that's with even in your own job, if you have good times, I suppose it's difficult to think, I might want to remember this a bit more in a few years. But you know, it's actually some people we've spoken to almost put maybe their achievements as a player with their clubs sort of above their international, which
I think your experience with your club are always probably more intense because you go, like with Morecambe, you train from the first week in June till the last week in May. You play 3 games a week. You play home, away, everywhere, and it's a small squad. So you almost live with the people. You become almost family with them. While international, you maybe meet up 3 or 4 times a year. You're technically still competing with them for a game. Some are based in London, some are based in wherever. So it's probably harder to have a closer bond, which means wins and losses are less intense. The feeling is less intense. But I think anyone who grew up Irish and grew up, as I said, not even dreaming of getting to that level, just standing there with the national anthem playing, you're thinking this is some wake kind of thing, like, you know. So
I know there was a little drawn to Iceland, but the sort of bit I wanted to focus on a little bit more is obviously going to Northern Ireland in the Irish League, and it's sort of it's football I'm familiar with because my wife's Northern Irish. She moved over a few years ago, so I still whenever I go back, I go and watch Ballymena and all that sort of crack. But obviously, the question I wanted to ask you is going from then professional sort of full-time football. Obviously, the Irish League on the whole is part-time. Is it a difficult transition? And I suppose, if you don't mind me asking a slightly personal question, was there an element where you thought maybe not that you could walk into it because of your background, but do you know what I'm getting at? Like, was there a bit of a, and I don't mean that in a difficult way, sort of?
I think so. I think when you go back, and you see that even now, you see, I always laughed at international under-16 players, and they almost used to think, I could go and play for Cliftonville's first team in the morning. I'm that good, because they're getting linked with Liverpool and Man United and whatever. Yeah. It's not that. It's not. It doesn't, one and one, they don't equal off. I think when I went back originally, I did think, yes, that this standard will be fine for me. I'll be able to play here, no problem. And that's probably true. I did okay, but I'm saying that's probably true if I had maintained all the professionalism, all the fitness, all the everything. If you keep your standard at professional level and you come into a semi-professional level, then of course your ability is going to carry you through, and you'll stand out. Which you see even now with players in the league that come back from places or have little stints in Scotland or England. You straight away, they come back, they're fitter, stronger, leaner. They know how to look after themselves. But yeah, I definitely think there's that kind of, again, youthful arrogance probably to think, I'm better than this, I've played at these levels. From my point of view, it wasn't at the time, because from my point of view, I kind of wanted to almost get out of football when I came back first. I signed for Glenavon purely for financial, purely to be able to earn money. Honestly, motivation-wise, I didn't even really, I just did it because I had to, because I was qualified in nothing. I had no experience in anything besides football. So it was kind of more to get money coming in so that I could bide my time and realise what I wanted to do. Because at the time, I wouldn't have played five-a-side for you if you paid me. So I mean,
really?
It was the mental side of things. Although professional football was brilliant, the mental side of things, I couldn't deal with negatives, which meant that I blew everything out of proportion. So even when I went back, then if I had a poor training session, even at Glenavon or something, then even more so I would have went worse. It would have been like, well, I'm better than this level and I can't even do well in training. I can't do this.
Yeah.
So I just grew everything in my head. But luckily enough, then after probably 6 months or so of doing it, then one of the coaches put his arm around me, and I got probably the right message that I needed. And from there, I've loved it ever since, and never looked back, basically.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting you say that. I spoke to someone who plays for Glentoran, Shannon Clucas, and he took like a gap year. I think he went to Australia, and it was that sort of thing that you were talking about. I think he'd almost come out of the professional game, and I suppose we don't necessarily even nowadays maybe understand, especially if you've grown up like you have and not really known anything else but the professional football environment. We don't necessarily understand the impact on the mental side of the game still, even nowadays. I think it's getting better, isn't it? You probably know better than me, but.
I remember speaking to, there's a couple of boys, was like Michael Carville, Andy Waterworth, boys like that, who had gone away and played places, and like so. And Andy was at Hamilton and Carville was at Wrexham. But we were saying, if you look across all the players that come back, generally they either take a year to two to settle, or they take a move. So they'll come back, someone you think, oh, he'll be a good signing for Linfield, and then it doesn't work out. But when he leaves, then to go, so Shannon's probably a good example. There's loads of examples where you sign for Linfield and you think, oh, he's this and he's that. But he doesn't become a bad player. He's just adjusting to the league, adjusting to the fact that he's training at night, adjusting to the fact that he doesn't have the same support in terms of coaching staff and stuff like that. So usually we found that it was within a year or two you settled and your ability came out, or within a move. So like Shannon Clucas maybe at Dungannon showed his quality, now he's back at Glentoran. Chris Hegarty went to Linfield after playing for Rangers for ages, came back, left, went to Dungannon, flying, now he's a Crusader. So this is, I just think sometimes people underestimate how much the transition is in terms of even just training. Like, you're used to your training your whole life as in the morning.
Yeah.
So simply, what do you do all day now until 6 o'clock when you start training? Your whole schedule is wrong. It's different. You have to completely change your whole life, and whether you have to get a job or go back and study, and then it's everything. Everything is completely different. But
I think it's interesting you sort of mention that, and the reason I sort of say that is obviously, I suppose, going from training every day to then, like you mentioned earlier, trying to keep those professional standards. But if you've only then gone from every day to training twice a week, or I suppose if you have a midweek game even once a week, it's hard to then train on your own, I suppose. And the only way I think people who haven't played in a professional game can relate to that, I suppose, if you get an injury or something like that, and because you're on your own, you don't have interaction. And I suppose if you're going from that full-time environment to then trying to keep that level on your own, it must be so tough to do that.
And even the simple, like, think of the simplest thing. Everybody, like I'm like, like everybody would say, right, well, I need to look after myself. I need to go and do a bit in the gym a couple of times a week, or go and do a class, or go and do whatever. these boys have never been to a class. They've never gone to a gym and had to do their own thing. They've always had a program. It's been an environment where they've been told what to do by a sports scientist. He's probably been there with them. And now you have to go. It's part of it, or you get fined, you get whatever. Well, now it's a case of, okay, we'll see you Tuesday and Thursday for an hour and a half, of which 25 minutes, 20 minutes is tough. The rest of it is a warm-up and some shooting or whatever. So you're really only working for 40 minutes in the week. So if you, for example, if you keep eating, if you keep living the same life that you're eating, or that you're living in terms of like high carb, everything like that, and you're not that body type and that shape to deal with it, it's only going to go one way. And then you think, right, well, I'm doing everything I used to do, but I'm not as quick, I'm not as strong, I'm not as sharp. And then you're like, what is it? What can I change? So people have to completely change their structure, which is why I think, and there is some kind of models being put together, but there should be some kind of an exit academy almost in Ireland for players, so they keep training every day through the IFA or through somebody, and so they train 4 or 5 mornings a week. They get a certain level of support, but they go through an apprenticeship or a coaching course or something as long with it, and then they also sign for Cliftonville Crusaders, Linfield, and play in the league. So that I think you'd find an awful lot of players that come back would end up going back again if they had that kind of safety net to come back to.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense actually when you put it like that. I think it's because I suppose otherwise you just sort of left to fend for yourself suddenly, aren't you? Just sort of kicked out the door for the one better phrase.
You drop off a cliff like in that way of you go from people picking up after you, telling you where to be every hour of the day. You're very structured. You're very together. Even in the dressing room, like if you go to a dressing room with Cliftonville Crusaders, everyone has their own life. Like they all have kids, family, everything else. So it's not even like in a professional environment here at Motherwell. You probably see a lot of the lads go for lunch, they might go for dinner, they go golfing together. But these boys are living in Belfast. They've lived in Belfast their whole life, for example. Their family circle, their friend circle, nothing to do with football. So they have a Christmas night out and stuff, but it's not like you'd be going out and hanging out with these guys on a Tuesday afternoon or a Wednesday afternoon. So it's completely different. So it's a shock for anyone's system, mentally and physically as well.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And we'll sort of get onto your sort of job in a minute, but I suppose that gives you maybe that, I suppose where you are, you're on the coalface of that, aren't you? Of that exit for, I suppose, not a majority, but there's going to be a large proportion of the lads you're working with who maybe aren't going to get a professional contract. And I suppose that maybe your experiences then maybe helps the way you deliver that, I suppose. But,
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think that's the message that, like, on our staff, we have Maurice Ross, we have Keith Leslie, and we have Stephen Robinson, all played 400 or 500 games as a professional, all like Premier League type level in terms of Scotland or lower leagues in England stuff. And although I had what would be deemed a reasonably successful career, I understand the realities of having to work and play. I understand the realities of having no contract, waking up and realizing you're not qualified in anything. Like, you know what I mean? You're sitting after a few years and you think, right, well, I don't have anything to my name, I need to start again. So I think their message is that you try and get into the players' heads as early as possible so that they are always planning and they're always doing something different, because if they don't, then they have that off a cliff moment. And I think it's my job to make sure that you limit that, you limit the transition out of it. And then if for any reason they don't get a contract at our place, then you try and point them towards part-time clubs, education, scholarships in America, things, alternative options where they can still continue their development and maybe get employment or get education or something as well. Because as I said, the numbers are probably 8 or 9 out of 10 of U18 players, and they get released and a lot of them fall out of the game.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think that's it's very admirable, for you to sort of do that. Because I suppose it maybe goes beyond what other clubs. I'm not asking you to comment on it, but what other clubs might do in comparison. So I think that's very admirable of that.
I think the good thing with that is at a smaller club, you only have so many. So like this year, probably I think fair enough, 11 out of 15 players that have been under me in terms of full-time contracted players probably are not in at the minute. So 6 or 7 are not yet back because of the coronavirus, and then 3 or 4 got released. Right. So you're already looking at, is there an alternative for all 11? Is there something you could put in place for the 7 with a view to next season in case the U-team football doesn't come back for months? So one of the lads who got released signed for Albion Rovers the other day in lower leagues, and he told me last night he signed up for a college course and stuff, which is amazing. Like that makes me feel a lot better, because there's a good possibility he'll he'll land life-wise like solid, and he'll also potentially keep his football career going.
Yeah, no, I think that's incredible, really, that, you know, you got the experience to do that. Because, as I say, I don't know if all coaches necessarily do. You hear these sort of horror stories, don't you, from some clubs? But just I want to touch on, obviously, you mentioned being at Cliftonville Crusaders, and you actually won 4 leagues in 4 seasons with 2 different clubs, didn't you? So obviously a successful time. But in terms of the you mentioned it earlier about maybe the training, but what other differences are there in playing in the Irish League compared to, you know, the professional environment? And what I mean is like, for me, I've watched tons and tons of games whenever I've been over with my sort of family, and I think I've seen 1-0 in about 30 games. So, you know, it's always high scoring, sort of exciting football. But from being on the pitch, what would you say is the sort of biggest differences, really?
I think it's in a lot of ways it's very similar to Championship or League One in Scotland. It's up and at them, physical, high pace, high intensity. Some teams get the ball forward very, very quickly, and then it's a kind of crazy gang off the pitch, if you know what I mean, of fellas that are just coming from all sorts of things, and they're there mainly to have a laugh, to enjoy themselves, and to try and win. But it's not the be all and end all. So it's a culture shock, it's a culture difference, because even fellas who play for Ayr or East Fife or something in Scotland still think of themselves as footballers. They maybe still have a swagger as a footballer, and still think, oh, whatever, I'm playing for this. While in the Irish League, generally, more often than not, it's more kind of their priority is being a banker during the day or a postman, and they go and they're lucky that they get paid a few quid, so it helps them pay the mortgage, kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, of course.
But the style of football itself, I would say, is very similar to playing for Falkirk or Ayr or something like that. It shows you it's competitive between them as well. They've done that competition the last couple of years. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. Was it the Iron Brew Cup, I think, as well? They've done, or whatever it's called now, isn't it? That sort of thing. Just something I want to ask you really quickly, and you know, you don't feel like you have to answer it if it's anything sort of too not personal, but obviously you won 2 leagues and cup and sort of a multitude of cups at Cliftonville. Why then go to Crusaders? Obviously, it turned out to be, and maybe you were the common denominator for both teams, that, you know, you're at both teams and they win the league back to back. But do you know what I mean? Like, obviously, a team that's, you know, incredibly successful. If you don't want me asking, why then would you move somewhere else?
It was the end of my contract, and and Cliftonville had kind of said, listen, there'll be a deal there for you if you choose to stay. It's up. There's a deal there. Don't worry, kind of thing. The problem I had is that Joe Gormley and Liam Boyce were the strikers. They were the attacking options. So they were very, very good, but also then you want to play more, you want to start more, you want to get involved more. So as successful as we were, I knew I was going to retire young. I intended on retiring when I had my coaching qualifications and things, so I knew I wasn't going to play for many more years. So there was an opportunity to go to a few other places, Glentoran, a few different clubs had kind of expressed interest, Coleraine, different places. So I just looked at the options. I spoke to Stephen at Crusaders, and I live, my wife was from Belfast, from the area itself, so I lived right in between both grounds, so it meant no change whatsoever in my lifestyle. And obviously I just liked what Stephen had to say, what he was all about, and you could see that the quality was in the squad, that they'd be in the top few. And I think I was just lucky in that way that the years that I was there, it was the perfect kind of combination, and it just worked out that we were successful. There was no fallout like with anybody in terms of Cliftonville or that. And even after I left, because I still lived in the area for years, I still had great relationships with all the Cliftonville people. But it was just one of them decisions. Because I had 2 exceptional talents in front of me, it was a case of, right, well, I need to go and play. And then, as you said, it was the catalyst for more success, which was fantastic.
Yeah, as I say, it must have been. I know you sort of mentioned it, but you know, it can't be a fluke for you to be there 4 years and four league titles. But
it's a quick question. That's all I get out of it. I'll be the answer to the question for years to come.
No, I appreciate that. No, it's I've got to be honest, just on a side note very quickly, like, I've been to quite a lot of Irish League grounds, and in a strange way, I quite like Solitude. Although it seems like parts of it is on its last legs and could crumble at any minute, there's a certain romance of sort of watching it in there. I don't know if it's the same sort of playing there, but
I think it could definitely do with some investment. Hopefully there's like stadium budgets and stuff come out here soon from government, and they'll get a few quid to put into the main stand and stuff.
Yeah, I do quite like some of the quirks of the Irish League in the sense of, you know, at Cliftonville, both fans are really behind each goal, which I don't know really any other ground you get that. And then, sort of, for example, Ballymena, there isn't, and you know, there's no stand behind either goal, so it's just side. You know, it's just little quirks like that. But Obviously, you just alluded about the coaching part. In terms of that coaching, it's something you always wanted to do. Was that alongside the football, or was it like, right, I'm going to finish football, do my badges, get all of that, and then go into it, or was it sort of done something alongside at the same time?
No, it was kind of, as I said, when I went back to play at Glenavon, I basically had hit a brick wall in terms of I wasn't qualified, I had no experience, so I kind of had to think what I wanted to do with my life. So I kind of planned it in the wrong way around. Maybe I just looked at the roles that I would love to do. So I kind of had decided that I wanted to get back into professional football, but it wouldn't be in a playing environment. So I parked that ambition, if you know what I mean. I didn't want to cling on to the fact that, oh, maybe I can go back. I didn't want to. So I thought, right, well, I'd love to be a coach. I'd love to do this. So I looked at jobs, looked at roles, and then I worked backwards. So I looked at the requirements. Thought, how long will it take me to get my A license? How long will it take me to get a coaching degree? How long will it take me to get experience at these levels? And these different things I need to tick off like any job. So at 28 or 29, I got my A license. 29, 30, I finished my degree. So at 29, I retired. So I had the mentality that once I got to the level of qualification that I needed, if that was the next step that I wanted to take, then I'm better off to start young. Yeah. I'm better off to do it ahead of time, so that when friends of mine are retiring at 33, 34, then I have a leg up, because at the end of the day, my playing experience won't stack up against others, which means you have to be a better coach. Right. So that's kind of, so I did it from that point, 23, 24. I kind of, it sounds fancy to say development plan, personal development plan and stuff. I didn't do that. I just I had 4 or 5 aims in my head, and I knew I wanted to achieve them, and I knew how long they would take. Yeah. And at the point where I had, I think, 4 or 5 of them all completed, I retired and focused on coaching.
No, I think that's great, and I think it's actually quite a unique. You don't hear that story sort of often from players. So I think it's fantastic. Obviously you're with Motherwell now, the under 18s and that sort of environment. Is there any ambition to ever go to sort of go on to the more senior level and start and get involved in that, or is that always going to be your sort of thing of prefer to work with youth players? Do you think?
I don't see, to be honest, it's tough. People ask me all the time, and they say, "Oh, do you see yourself being a manager? Do you see yourself?" I would say right now, I don't see myself being an elite level manager at like a big club. I think it's a certain personality trait that maybe I'd be more suited to being an assistant or focusing on the coaching. It's more my passion than maybe being the main man, basically. So at the minute, I take the 18s, take the reserves. Because of the coronavirus, I've been lucky enough to come back now. So today was first team. I got a chance to. So the last few days, I've been taking little bits of the first team. And I think anybody who, given the choice, would prefer to be in the first team. I prefer to be involved in the first team coaching setup at some stage. I'm only 33, so I have years on my side in that way. But I think the long-term goal would be to, and I think this sounds vague, but to work at the elite level. So whether that is an under 18s at an elite level, whether it is reserves at elite level, or in a first team coaching staff, I just want to work with the highest level of players possible. Obviously, earn a good living and things like that. But I think from my point of view, I think in the next couple of years, you'd love to progress up through the levels and go 18s, reserves, and then be exposed to more and more first team stuff.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, because I think even, my job sort of teaching, sometimes it's like, actually the higher up the chain you go, maybe the less of the bit you like doing, you do. And what I mean is sort of, even in teaching, if you become an assistant head, you're only in class for, 2.5 days a week, as opposed to the 5, but you sort of go into teaching to do the teaching part. And I suppose it's maybe similar with coaching, isn't it? If you're then a manager, maybe I can't imagine you can spend anywhere near as much time on the training pitch.
And that's a good example. So like our manager is, and I knew our manager before he was the manager of Motherwell. I knew him from the Irish FA, but he's known, his reputation is as a fantastic coach, and he's been a fantastic coach since the day he retired, and he did all sorts of U-team roles and assistant roles and stuff like that. But now as the manager, he takes, we'll say 30% of the coaching all week, or 40%, maybe 40% max. I would say 40% of the coaching. But purely because he has so many other balls in the air to manage, and there's so much more. Everyone, when you're the manager, everyone needs your input. They need your opinion. They need time with you. While in comparison, the assistant manager can just focus on planning the session, delivering the session, making sure the players are all good. And that's kind of, obviously there's other parts of the role, but a larger portion of someone's role is the thing that they want to do. And I think you always have to have that and burning desire, the burning ambition to be the main man, to be the manager. And I think a certain character trait has to be in you. You can't fake it. It's like any job. You can't. Yeah. You're not a leader if you're not a leader at that level. Then I think you get found out. So you're better off to specialize in what you're good at.
Completely agree with you.
That's what I think at the minute. It's tough to answer because I'm still young in that way, but I wouldn't imagine I'll end up being a Premier League manager.
I completely get what you mean, though. I think I feel the same, and even in my sort of line of work, I've never wanted to be a sort of that leadership role. But yeah, I'm just you're probably going to ask you before, but just to finish off with some quick fire sort of questions because we like to sort of compare them with other pros. Just the best ground that you've ever played at.
Ibrox, maybe.
Right. Okay. Very good.
Ibrox. It was only a youth team.
Yeah.
I think there was 12,000 at a youth team game, and it was amazing. And we were like 16, so it was different class. So probably
the best player you've played with or against.
I always joke with people saying like I'll throw out a name like Roy Keane or Larson or someone. I didn't play with them. Like I could say Roy Keane, but I never really played with them. I would say of my generation of players that I played with and things, Aidan McGeady was the biggest talent that I had played with for years as youth team. He was a year ahead of me. Obviously, I played the odd game with players from the reserves and stuff, but you don't have the same experience. You don't have the same. It's ridiculous for me to say Keane or Larson or something. Yeah. I didn't play with them at that level. Do you know what I mean?
That's not a bad name, though, Aidan McGeady, still to have played with. Cracking player, isn't he? But I don't want to put you on the spot with this one. You don't have to answer. But the best manager you've had.
I'd probably say Stephen Baxter. I would say at the end, he was probably the most, for me at that time in my career, he was probably the best manager I had. I had some great youth team managers, but I would say Stephen. Tommy was very good at Cliftonville as well, but I would say Stephen was probably best suited to me in terms of he treated me like a man, like with a nod to the game and stuff at that age, and he never told me any lies in that way, and that's all you can ask for.
And then the last question. So this series started over a year ago, but it was actually just speaking to fans and the odd sort of person involved in a football club. It was actually about their favourite ever game. But since we started interviewing sort of pros like yourself, we then sort of jigged it around a bit. We still like to ask that question. So it'd be not just a favourite ever game. So you can have two sort of for this. One that you played in, and then one that you've watched. So whether it be on TV or been at the ground. So what would be your favourite ever football matches? One as a player and then one as a fan, for want of a better phrase.
Well, you put me under pressure now.
Oh, sorry.
I would say watched as a fan purely for the experience of it, because I haven't, with playing all the years, you don't go as a fan to games that much.
No.
So as a fan, myself and two of my best friends went to the Euros to watch Ireland.
Yeah.
So we watched Ireland against Sweden in the Parc des Princes in Paris, and we won. So it was amazing.
Yeah.
In terms of experience and properly experiencing it like a fan, in terms of having a couple of drinks and walking to the stadium and all that kind of stuff, it was brilliant. So I would say that as a game. And then played in, I would probably say Cliftonville, the League Cup final. So it was the first trophy that Cliftonville won, and it was the first trophy that I'd won. League Cup final in 2013. I scored it was deflected, but I scored the first goal.
Oh, you got to claim it, haven't you?
That's the winner. There was no other goal. It won 4-0. But no, that was, as I said, like you go through all sorts of lows in your career, and that was a huge high point, and that was the first real proper like euphoria for us, like, because we'd never won anything, so it was unbelievable. Celebrations were tremendous.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Two cracking games to finish off with as well. So I just want to say thank you so much for today. I really appreciate you giving up your time, and you've been incredibly honest, and actually it's been fantastic. Diarmuid, thank you so much for this. Honestly, I can't thank you so much for doing this today. I appreciate you doing that.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.